In cooking, there's always something new to learn, and that often involves asking questions and getting answers. And today we're going to do just that in the first ever I Want to Cook Q&A, where I fielded a bunch of questions from you, and today I'm going to answer them. So let's get to it. Hello and welcome to I Want to Cook. My name is Chef Matt and this channel is all about helping you be a better cook. And as I said in that intro, we're doing something a little bit different this week. Instead of making a recipe or trying out some weird new gadget that I found at the thrift store, I'm going to be answering your questions. And there's a good reason I'm doing it this week is because I wasn't here at home this whole past week to develop a recipe or test some crazy weird appliance. And well, that gets us into our first question. This one comes from Jazz0904, who wants to know, well, more info on me and how I started cooking. All right, so thanks for the question, Jazz. And as some of you may know, my day job is, well, a pretty cool job too. I review cars for a living for Kelley Blue Book. So what I do is I test drive different cars and I write reviews about them. And well, that leads me to why I wasn't here this week. I was doing a big test drive. My whole team was out in Virginia and out in the Washington, D.C. area where we were testing a bunch of cars. It was great time to be had by all, but it was a very busy week. And well, since I wasn't here at home at nights to, again, develop a recipe or do any sort of cooking, well, that's why I'm doing this today. Now, I've discussed this in a previous video that before I was an automotive writer and automotive journalist, I was a food writer. I worked for a newspaper for over a decade and I had a bunch of different roles there. And one of them was food writing. And I decided to get really serious about food writing. I kind of went method and I actually went to culinary school. I became a trained chef. I got a degree in culinary arts just so I could be a better food writer. And even after I left the newspaper and I went to Kelley Blue Book, I was still writing about food on the side as a freelancer. I was writing for magazines and even my old newspaper. But during the pandemic, well, all that freelance work dried up and, well, I said, let's turn on a video camera and start a YouTube channel, and here we are 5 years later. So there's a little bit of background on me. You can call me a cars and culinary guy because, well, I write about cars and I still do all this cooking and food stuff now here on YouTube. Okay, our next question comes from bmore153, who says, how do you meal plan for 2 people but keep it easy yet interesting? Well, that's right in my wheelhouse. There's 2 humans in this household along with 2 dogs, so I'm often planning such meals. And well, here's the great thing about recipes and kind of where we're at in our modern cooking age. So any recipe can be modified for 2 people. If it's a recipe for just 1 serving, then you obviously double it. If it's something for 4, you have it. So that's easy enough, but the whole, interesting yet easy portion, my best advice is using something like an appliance that's going to make it easier. If you're a regular viewer of this channel, you know that I'm a big fan of things like Instant Pots, air fryers, where I'm always just kind of loading them up, pressing a button, and then setting it and forgetting it. It's just so easy. And there's so many different recipes that you can make in one of those. Again, I've done a ton of like air fryer recipes, everything from falafel and shrimp to, well, even a frittata recently. And the same goes for something like an electric pressure cooker like the Instant Pot. You can make almost anything in that, from beans and chili to soups. It's just so much. So if you're just kind of, getting your toes wet in cooking, don't discount one of those devices. They really do make things easy and pretty foolproof. And because of their size, you can easily make a meal for 2 or more people. Okay, our next question comes via Facebook, and this is from my friend Jill. She wants to know about dairy substitutions. That's always a good topic. She says, if I can't use butter or milk, what can I substitute in a recipe instead? And well, if you're vegan or vegetarian or just trying to cut out dairy from your diet, thankfully there's a lot of great alternatives. So in general, as a substitute for butter, let's say in baking, a vegetable oil can go a long way. That's a really good option, and it still gives you kind of that unctuousness, that mouthfeel, and that nice fattiness that you would get with butter. Now, as far as milks, that's even easier because there's a lot of dairy alternatives. Now, I usually use almond milk or soy milk, but there's so many different milks out there. I think I even did an episode on banana milk. Yeah, I did, and that stuff was pretty good. Now, those are great alternatives to dairy, and they can work in both, just kind of applications where you would pour and go, or even in baking. And then finally for eggs, yes, there are substitutions for that. There are, of course, like vegan alternatives, or you can do something like just egg, which I tried and I thought tasted pretty good. And one you may not know about as an egg replacer are chia seeds. These things work great. All you have to do is put them in water, and what happens is they kind of get like this gelatinous form, and that is a really good egg substitute. And if you're a diehard viewer, you might remember that I did a video on chia seeds mixed with water and some flavorings to make a drink called ischiati, which is kind of like my secret weapon for running half marathons. Okay, we've got another question. This one is from my friend Lori, and this is also from Facebook. She says, I have a stand mixer and I have no idea what to do with it. I'd love some tips for a few basic recipes for bread or other healthy things. Well, you might recall this guy. This is my vintage KitchenAid stand mixer, the one that I scored at a thrift store for like $30. It's incredible. Stand mixers are wonderful. Maybe you got one of these things like as a wedding present, or just let's be real, they just look cool. Maybe it just sits on your countertop, but it doesn't get much use. Well, it should, because these things are just powerhouses. Now, of course, they can mix, and if let's say you've never used one of these, just put on the whisk attachment and whisk up some eggs. So the next time you make scrambled eggs, instead of taking your whisk, and doing it the manual way, put on this guy, turn it on, and let it go. Your eggs are going to be so much better for it because they're mixed so much better. But of course, that's just the beginning. If you want to try something like a bread, I would recommend just an easy, quick bread like cornbread or even brownies to start off with. It's going to help you kind of get to know your machine, get a sense of the way it operates. But again, that's just the beginning. If you've got one of these things, well, it's going to open up a whole world beyond what this thing can do right here. And that's because these have what's called like a power takeoff unit. What you can do is you can put different accessories on these, and you can use this as a different machine. So you might recall that we actually did shaved ice with this guy because we had like a shaved ice maker and it turned it into a shaved ice machine. There's so many different accessories, from like spiralizers to pasta makers. They are incredible. So if you've got one of these things, just start playing with it. Just start using it. Again, go with the easy stuff first, and then I think you're soon going to fall in love with it. They really are great. Now, of course, this is a KitchenAid model, but there's lots of different brands. There's lots of different makers. And I even did a video on like a stand mixer versus a hand mixer if you're not quite sure which is best for you. And I'll put a link to that video below so that you can kind of figure out which is going to be best for you in your kitchen. Okay, this next one comes from my friend Jeff, also via Facebook. He wants to know my thoughts on herbs and spices, and well, I love them. I mean, herbs and spices, they're like, a lot of times when we think of seasoning, foods, we just think of salt and pepper, but herbs and spices can do wonders for your cooking. I mean, and just, it really brightens things up. So we can go either fresh or dry for herbs, something like parsley or cilantro, and both work wonders. Now, one thing you really should know when you're working with herbs such as that is if you're making a sauce, let's say you're making a marinara sauce, you're going to want to use dry herbs for that, because what happens is if you put fresh herbs in too soon, they can get bitter, they can just get not very aesthetically pleasing. Save the fresh stuff for as a garnish or right at the last minute for cooking, and then use the dry stuff. You can incorporate that in earlier. And as far as spices, well, you know that I'm a spice head, so anything like dried chilies, fresh chilies, things like cayenne, they can just make your meals pop. And well, I want to hear from you on this one. What's your favorite herbs and spice? Put that in the comments below. My friend Brandy via Facebook wants to know two things. She wants to know if you can make stainless steel cookware non-stick, and well, you sure can, at least more non-stick than usual. I did a whole video on this, but the secret to making a stainless steel pan non-stick is you heat the pan first, you get it nice and hot, then you put some oil in it, even something like butter, but usually a high temperature vegetable oil is going to work better, or a high temperature oil like avocado oil. You coat the pan with that oil, you swirl it around until it starts to shimmer, and then when you put the food in and cook it, well, it's going to be more non-stick. Another key to making sure that your food does not stick to a stainless steel pan is to let it cook. Don't start trying to flip it too soon. When the food is ready to be released, it's going to kind of let you know, because what happens is that crust is going to form at the bottom, and when it is ready, you're going to be able to put a spatula right underneath and flip it over. So that's kind of a real basic way of making a stainless steel pan non-stick. She also wants to know if you should put oil in your water when boiling pasta. I used to do that, but I don't anymore because I really don't find any benefit of it. I do salt my boiling water well to make sure that the pasta is being seasoned, but what I do is after I'm done cooking pasta these days and I've drained it in a colander, then I put some olive oil on the pasta and I toss it around. That not only helps it to not stick, but it also adds flavor to the pasta. So next time you're making pasta, once you've drained it, try putting a tablespoon or two of olive oil into the pasta, tossing it around, and well, just see if you like it, because I really think you will. Okay, here's one from YouTube. This is from Rentubero002, and they ask, is an aluminum kettle good for your health or not? Well, let's talk about aluminum in general, and I did a whole episode on aluminum versus stainless steel, and if you'll recall from that episode, aluminum is generally considered safe. Tests have shown that, but I'm not a big fan of just pure aluminum cookware. Beyond any health concerns, I just don't like the way that it can react with foods, especially acidic foods, and it's also more porous, so it can get pitted. It's definitely not my favorite cooking material. Now, anodized aluminum is better, and again, I did a whole episode on aluminum versus anodized aluminum, and I'll put a link to that video in the description below. But as for a kettle, well, what I use is either this old, you might recall this guy, this is my vintage CorningWare kettle made of pyroceram, or more recently that electric kettle that I got at the thrift store, that Hayden. I use it every single day. This is a specialized like glass ceramic. The Hayden kettle is stainless steel. You can also use an enameled cast iron, something like a Le Creuset kettle. I think that'd be a far better material than aluminum. I wouldn't want to use just a pure aluminum kettle. The next one comes from my dear mom. You might remember we made a couple videos together, and well, she's like the OG cook in my family, the one who is, let's be real, is still the best cook among us. And she wants me to point out store brands versus name brands when it comes to different things, pastas and sauces and whatever. And is there any difference? Well, that is a great question. And, maybe, I mean, some things I can't tell the difference, or I think the store brand is just as good. I'm a big store brand guy because often it saves money, and well, with the amount of food that I buy, I'm always looking to save money. So yeah, I think store brands are great and I buy them often. You know, sometimes I buy name brands, but I think store brands are great. Oh, what do you think? Are you a store brand person or a name brand person? And can you tell a difference? Let me know in the comments below. Okay, almost wrapped up here. My friend Ron from Facebook wants to know, when I warm my tortillas, do I use a comal or do I use the range? And you might recall, well, I love using a gas range to heat my tortillas. You might remember I did a video on that very early on. If you want to toast your tortillas to perfection, get a nice little char on them, use a gas range if you have it. It's just absolutely delicious. Of course, a skillet works as well. You won't get quite the char, but for something very authentic, use a gas range. I'll put a link to that video in the description below. It might just change the way you toast your tortillas forever. Okay, and last but not least, you know, questions I get to learn from you too, because well, I get to research some of your questions. And after I made that CorningWare episode about vintage pyroceram Corningware, I had quite a few viewers say, hey, you know, I know you say it's made in America, but I have Corningware that says made in Canada. Was it ever made there? Yes, it was. I didn't know that, but Corning had a factory in Canada. I'm not sure where. I'm not sure if it was Ontario or Toronto or where it was, but Corning did indeed have a factory in Canada. So if you have some vintage Corningware that says made in Canada, well, you've got some really special stuff. I've never seen it in person, like at a thrift store or anything, but if you have it, yes, it is authentic and you've got something very special. So thank you for those questions, because again, I get to learn from you and I get to learn something too, because we always are. I mean, just when I think I know a few things about cooking, there's so much more to learn. I hope this helped you, you know, get some answers to your questions. And if you have more, please keep them coming, because if you guys like this, I'll make this kind of a semi-regular thing. Okay, before we get to trivia time, a little show and tell, or once again, taste and tell. We've got some really good honey here. Farmer Dan's reached out to me and said, hey, do you want to try my honey? And I said, of course I do. Now, they're not paying me to say this or anything, but it's really good honey. We've been enjoying the whipped honey, very delicious, but there's also maple infused honey and orange infused honey and even some hot honey. Very good stuff. I love, you know, kind of sharing the word about a family-run business like this. If you're interested in checking out Farmer Dan's Honey, I'll put a link to their website below. You can see what they're all about. And if you love honey, you're probably really going to love this stuff. So thanks, Farmer Dan's, for letting me try your honey. Very, very good. Okay, trivia time. Last week, I asked you to identify this strange plastic tool. And well, you've proved to me again that I cannot stump you, because so many people actually knew exactly what this is. It is a bubble popper / measurer for canning. So you use this to get the last of those bubbles out before sealing that canning jar. I haven't really done canning, to be honest with you. Maybe that'll be a future episode, but when I do, well, I know that I've got the tool for that last step. So congratulations to everybody who correctly identified this strange looking device. For this week's culinary tool trivia, I've got a very odd looking tool here. It's, well, as you can see, it's a knife and it's not broken. So what is this? What kind of knife is this? If you know or you have a guess, be sure to put that in the comments below, and I will, of course, let you know the correct answer in the next episode. Hey, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this Q&A, something a little bit different. And if you're curious about kind of my journey on YouTube and my best advice for, well, if you're starting a YouTube channel, I'll put a link to a whole video I did right up here, and you can check that out. I think you're really going to enjoy it. So until next time, I want you to cook.